Aloha, my name's Anna Covert, and I'm coming to you from my battleship here on the beautiful island of Oahu. This week on the Covert Code, the topic is Beyond the Deal and what it really takes to win in private equity. My very special guest is Tyrone R. Johnson, CEO of Cascade Residential Services, operating partner at Thrive Capital, and author of Beyond the Deal, a CEO's guide to private equity success. With more than 20 years of executive leadership experience, Ty has worked with Fortune 500 companies, private equity firms, turnarounds, and startups, and has a deep expertise in the technology, industrial, and financial segments. Today, we'll be talking about what happens after the deal closes, why execution is key, and how leaders can really benefit from private equity-backed businesses. Thanks so much for being here, Ty.
Hey, thanks for having me, Anna. Real pleasure.
So to get us started, we love the Cliff Notes version of the Ty story. You're such an interesting guy. How did you get from where you were to where you are now? What you think is important for our listeners to know about you?
Yeah, well, look, I kind of fell into private equity accidentally. I came up kind of blue chip corporate background, GE early in my career, moved around a lot. And someone that I used to work with ended up going to a business that was private equity backed. I went and joined him, and then I caught the bug. And I've been doing that over 20 years now. What I love about it is it's very challenging, but at the same time, very rewarding. And for me, every few years, you get a new opportunity, right? If you do a good job. So I like that it's not monotonous. I love that there's a challenge to it. And I love building and scaling things. So it's the perfect environment for me.
Wow. And where are you located right now?
So right now I'm in Florida.
Oh, Florida. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So everyone always, this is something they always ask me. I'm going to ask you, why did you decide to write this book? Have you always been working on a book? Is something you always wanted to do? Tell me the book story.
Yeah, no, it's not something I always sought out to do. I have not been working on a book for the last 10 years. It was basically something that came to fruition by virtue of me talking to a number of CEOs over the years who were new to private equity. I'd find myself at conferences or other situations where, because I did have some experience, people would pull me aside and ask me my thoughts on certain aspects of being a first-time private equity CEO. And over the course of the years, I found that there's this huge gap in knowledge and experience with these folks, and there's not really, as far as I can tell, great resources out there for them to kind of make the transition. So I decided to write a book to maybe help other people make the transition a little bit smoother, a little less scary, hopefully help make them more successful.
It's really great. So what are some of these, what do you think in your experience is one of the number one kind of problems or things that come up, what are some of these overcoming things?
Well, it's a very different environment, Anna, for most CEOs. The companies that my firm works with, more often than not, are former founder-led organizations, entrepreneurs, people who are obtaining institutional capital for the first time, right? So it's a very different business environment. Think about it this way. They probably have a boss for the first time now, right? They're in a situation where they're reporting to someone. They have to answer to someone. And that can be difficult for certain types of operators, right? On top of that, private equity is a very fast-paced environment. So that's sometimes a difficult transition. And then there's a different financial language associated with working in private equity, right? There's, EBITDA and all these acronyms that, folks use to measure performance and gauge whether or not the business is doing well. The last thing I would say, you're probably going to have to get into growth mode in a different way than you're accustomed to. And part of that could be M&A, and the experience associated with buying companies and making sure that they're integrated properly and that the management team that you bring on is able to execute is fairly new to some of these people. So I try to walk them through all of these transitions and help them understand, at least from my experience, the best way to build a business that's sustainable and creates a fair amount of value.
Yeah, I can imagine that could be pretty a whole new world, right? As Aladdin would call it.
It is exactly. It's a whole new world, and The reason I wrote the book is because there's a lot of materials out there, Anna, on the deal itself, getting to the point where you sell your company, how to sell your company, how to position your company for success. But I didn't see a lot of material out there on, well, what happens next. And in the conversations that I've had with CEOs, that's what's missing, right? So they're like, okay, the deal's done, maybe there's a nice, check that's been received, but now what, right? And this book answers the now what.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think especially when you think about working with the end in mind. And I know that's what a lot, we just had another guest on who kind of talking about exit planning, right? So
That's
one
right.
step beyond this, but I think it all matters now, like even starting with, okay, well, you people are so hyped up about selling or getting this money, and then what? Right. And is there a big letdown for a lot of people on, oh gosh, like now I've achieved that, but what's next? I'm sure there is.
No, there definitely is. There's a letdown, but there's also, in some cases, a bit of remorse, right? They missed their independence in some cases, right? It's no longer their baby. They're going to board meetings now, and there are presentations that have to be delivered, and they're answering questions that maybe they didn't have to answer before, and it could be uncomfortable for certain people. So it's not just that they're maybe disinterested because they've received a big check. It's the environment has changed. It's a different type of operating system, and they don't like it in some cases. Now, in other cases, founders come along and they do a fantastic job, but you don't really make that determination until you get into it. And what I try to do is help people understand and prepare for what it is, in a very transparent way. This may be great for you. This may not. Let's try to understand that in advance if possible.
Yeah, I mean, so what do you think separates business that scales successfully with one that struggles under pressure?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to two things primarily. I think if you have the right team and you have processes and procedures in place, you stand a much better chance of scaling successfully. Again, coming from a less professional environment into a professionalized environment, you'll find that people utilized instinct and gut and, kind of maybe, just kind of,
Off the seat of their pants kind of style, right?
seat of the pants, some people call it experience, and all of that matters. But if you're really going to scale a business and professionalize it, you need systems, you need processes, you need technology, right? You need things that make your business much more efficient. And then you need the talent around you that know how to implement those things. And then you need the data that comes out of these systems to help inform you as to whether or not the things you're doing make sense or you need to course correct. So the businesses that do well, they integrate quickly, they build the right team, and then they take off. The ones that I've seen that don't, frankly, they hang on to people that aren't performing because they're family members or close friends or people they've entrusted for years, or they just haven't, adopted the technology and implemented the systems that can support a much larger operation.
Growing a small business is exciting, but it can also get confusing fast when the numbers start pulling you in different directions. Robinson Aquino, CEO of JBS Corp. And author of The Small Business Money Game, created this book to help business owners better understand their finances, spot the growth plateaus before they become roadblocks, and make smarter decisions as they scale. To celebrate the launch, Robinson is giving away free copies of his brand new book. Want one? Go to thecovertcode.com to learn more.
Yeah, I think it makes a big difference. I mean, when you think about just leading, I have a very small company, but just leading with emotion more than just like numbers, right? There's a lot of feelings involved, especially as you grow a business, and that can be a big decision. Do you think that there's some personality types that do better? I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking of scientists, or I have some partners in another business of mine that are developers, and they have no interest in, they just want to, in their words, make cool shit and, be behind a computer. So there's I know you have some different expertise in different segments. Is there any difference between financial and technology and industrial segments that you've noticed, or any types of leader traits that you think maybe are an easier connection for the success after private equity acquisition?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I don't think it matters as much what discipline you come from or what industry you come from. What I found is that people that are competitive, right? People that want to win, right? They typically do well in this environment because it's fast paced, it's hands on, it's frankly not for everyone. You have no idea in some cases what tomorrow's going to look like, so you have to have a bit of calmness about you. But you have to stay focused on the end game, which is winning, and winning in our kind of vernacular is creating value, right? Creating a multiple upon exit that exceeds, what you bought the business for, or there's more EBITDA than when you bought the business. If you're focused on that, and frankly, if you build a team of we call it A players and competitive people, they tend to do well in this particular environment. The ones that are more kind of laid back or just interested in a solid day's work, or contributing here or there, probably not as successful in a private equity environment.
Yeah. So those are the ones that kind of they decide to phase themselves out, right? And
yeah.
then, right. So that happens pretty quickly.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to help them out, Anna, right? Because there's a little bit of disillusionment around what they're really bringing to the table. There's a imbalance between what they think they're doing and what the business needs. So sometimes people opt out and say, look, this environment isn't for me, and that's okay, frankly, right? But in other cases, people kind of live in denial for a while, and they don't really understand that they're not making it, they're not getting it done, and you have to have that tough discussion.
Yeah, I mean, do you ever see that there's like so much resistance that they try to almost self-sabotage the business?
Happens more than you would imagine, frankly. It sometimes happens from founders that get into the business and their authority is now not what it used to be. Maybe their gravitas isn't there. They don't have the same level of support that they once did from their employees because it's a different environment. And, they quiet quit in a lot of places. Maybe sabotage is extreme, but certainly the level of engagement goes down. They're not as helpful, frankly, as they could be and maybe should be. And it becomes very apparent that they're working against you, and you do have to exit those people. And I would say more than 50% of the time, that's the reason you're probably exiting an incumbent, right? Because they become despondent and, frankly, non-constructive.
Yeah. Non-constructive is a good way to go.
Yeah.
What a good way to put it.
Yes.
So when you're like stepping into a company, or identifying a company, what are you looking for to see if they're ready to take it to the next stage? Like, what will make them suitable for private equity?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of things, right? But for me, two things I look for in particular. Number one, and we've talked a little bit about this already, the team, right? How capable is the team for what it is we set out to do? When a private equity firm comes in to buy a company, they've conducted due diligence, right? They've gone through a process of evaluating the business, the team, the competition, all these things. And there's a thesis, right? There's some sort of reason to believe that by partnering, 2 + 2 can equal 5, right? So what I come in and do after, that process is really determine whether or not the team can take the journey with me and us in terms of where we think the end state is. And I think you have to be really clear-eyed about that. And there's so many really good people, but to your point earlier, it's not an emotional thing. This isn't really a evaluation as to whether or not Anna works hard or she's nice. It's, is she capable of doing what we need her to do for us to reach this outcome? So I spend a lot of time trying to determine whether or not we have, just kind of going back to competition and sports, like the athletes, right, to perform at the level that we need to. And then to the extent that we don't, we try to make changes as quickly as possible. And you do it in a way where people can maintain their dignity, right? There's just no reason to be rude or mean or insensitive, right? There's ways that you can have conversations with people where you can set them up for success elsewhere. So that's number one. And then number two, the infrastructure itself. Is this business sophisticated enough for what we need to do to scale it, right? If we're going to go out and buy 10 companies, or we're going to introduce a new product or build a new plant or whatever we're going to do, is the infrastructure in place to support the growth that's going to come, right? Is there an ERP? Is there a professional accounting system in place? Is there a CRM? If not, I spend most of the early days, right, building the team and building the infrastructure so that we can go out there and scale the business.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually one of the things that I specialize in is coming into companies like Fortune 500s and then helping them with technology audits because
Exactly.
it's shocking what people may not realize is that in big companies, there's typically on average 100 pieces of software.
Right.
But people don't even half of them aren't using. The other part are, there's economies of scale by mitigating or removing them and different we can save huge amounts of money like very, very, very quickly with licensing and just connected conversations and things like that. So
And what you're talking about, Anna, is so important because there's another really important reason to do this, not just to create the infrastructure so that the business can perform better and scale, but upon exit, right? Because one of the, truths about private equity is at some point in time, the company will be sold, right? Upon exit, the potential buyer wants to know and wants to understand the level of infrastructure that's been built because that will inform their decision, number one, if they want to buy the company, and maybe number two, how much they should pay for it. Because if they've spent more time and more money continuing to build out that infrastructure, maybe it's less valuable to them. So another reason to kind of get it done quickly and get it done right is it could be value enhancing.
Indeed. Right. If you get and then kind of back to before we switch to that topic, what do you think, I know the concept of peer principle, right? Where I think what I've noticed is in a lot of maybe smaller companies, right, someone has a role that maybe they shouldn't. They got the role because they were promoted and they've done their best. And to your point, they're really hard workers. But now private equity comes and now all of a sudden they realize that they're not this CFO material or whatever it might be. Are those kind of the ones that are easy to identify and that there's some feelings that happen to have to mitigate or overcome there with or are they usually happy to not have to keep that role?
It's a mixed bag in my experience, frankly. You'll find certain people when you have that discussion, they'll be like, oh, thank God. Because I really didn't want to tell you that this isn't for me. I was going to kind of give it the old college try, but deep down inside, I knew this wasn't for me, right? So sometimes people are frankly relieved, right? In other cases, like I said earlier, there is some denial. There's some kind of belief that they have the capability to do what you need them to do. And sometimes you'll say, look, I know the person isn't there now, but maybe they can get there. So with some development, some mentorship, some real support, maybe over a reasonable period of time, that person gets there. I've done that and I've seen that done. But when it's super clear, right, that, this person does not have the ability to go to the board meetings and talk with the investors and kind of create trust, right? You're going to have to make that change. And the role that you identified is one of the most important ones. The CFO of a private equity-backed portfolio company is a critical position to get right. They probably engage with the private equity firm even more than the CEO.
Right.
And if you think about it this way, the capital that's being raised and allocated, the CFO is ultimately responsible for that allocation, right? They are truly the fiduciary and the link between the company and the investment firm. So if you get that wrong, or if there are issues with, closing the books or the accuracy of the numbers or the time frame that it takes to provide, management with visibility into the performance, it's highly likely that person will get changed out.
Well, with so many things happening in the environment out there right now, the world is moving very quickly, as we know, with AI and just everything that's happening. Are you seeing any change in the private equity industry overall? What are people investing in? What are they not investing in? And are there any projections or trends that you see coming?
It's interesting you asked that because I'll answer that two ways. Number one, what are businesses and private equity firms doing as a result of AI to improve their operations, right? And then number two, how does that inform the decisions around, where you want to make an investment? But so we're using different AI resources for customer service, right? I think a lot of the portfolio companies within our firm are doing that. It just makes sense. I'm not ready to say that the technology can fully replace a human, but where you do have capacity constraints and you do have maybe some times of the day or weekends where you can't get to the phone, the AI assistants are very, very good and very, very capable. So we're seeing that across the board, more deployment of AI agents, particularly in kind of the customer service area, number one. And then number two, businesses like mine and others within the firm are using, agentic models for analysis, right? If I put on my operating partner hat, if we're out there evaluating a company and we're making a determination as to whether or not we want to invest, we might take the SIM, which is an acronym for Confidential Information Memorandum. This is the book the seller gives you to kind of go through all the features, advantages, and benefits of buying this company. I might just drop that into Claude, right? And say, hey, give me a summary of the merits of this deal. And within 2 or 3 minutes, I'll get 3 to 4 pages of really, really solid analysis.
It's incredible.
It's wild right now.
Yeah.
Heretofore, I would have gone through the 70 pages. I would have been taking my notes.
Highlighting.
Get on the phone with 3 or 4 other people. Well, what did you think about it? On and on and on. And in less than, a few minutes, you've got this really, really comprehensive, deep analysis that you can use now to probe further, right? It doesn't replace you doing your own diligence or making your own evaluation, but man, does it give you a head start as to where you should be focused on evaluating this company. So that's kind of, one part of it. The second part of it is you do see private equity firms starting to focus more in places like where I run Cascade services, residential services or commercial services, where there is still the requirement of frankly manual labor, right? Where you need a human in my business in particular, you need someone to climb in the attic, right? You need someone to like turn the wrench, and it can be landscaping. You need someone to mow the grass. You need someone to paint the house, right? You're starting to see, and this has been going on for years, frankly, an influx of private equity going to kind of those, blue collar type businesses that even with the advent of AI, and understand, it still takes the capability of human to perform that job at a high level. So you are seeing, maybe folks shying away from SaaS model businesses, so subscription as a service, there's cloud-based businesses, because the feeling is, maybe AI will surpass that very, very quickly. But the money is coming into professional services that require physically touching something and making it better or improving it. So we're seeing a lot of that.
That makes sense. Yeah, I heard in some of my networks that one of the ways companies were doing like almost like a rebrand to try to attract investors was just to change their name to include the word AI in it.
Yeah, there is a lot of that. I probably kind of date you in age a little bit, but I remember in the late 90s during the dot-com boom, people were doing something similar, and they called it vaporware back then, right? Like
vaporware. I've never heard that.
Because it would vaporize, it would vanish after a while because there was really no substance there. So I'm not sure what the correct current term is for kind of the people dressing up their SaaS businesses as agentic, but there's got to be something out there that is cute and whimsical that describes the practice.
Yeah, no, I think it's if I like vaporware, that's kind of, and they're trying to ride the wave, because what we've been seeing, in at least my side on tech, is that there used to be a lot more interest in kind of, prototyping or the discovery and the creation. And now people don't even care about that. They want to go right to the end product. Like if you don't have the end product, they're not going to be doing any of this development or what's the other word I'm looking for, like curation or investment into R&R, right?
100%. And that's another aspect of what we see going on throughout different industries is the, I'll call it the skipping of steps, frankly. Yeah. People kind of racing to the end, and AI is one of those things. If you can just say you've built something and it's agentic or it's powered by, Claude or one of these providers, you're seeing a lot of that without understanding whether or not there's real substance there. And, we get calls, I get emails every day from a new AI company that can help me do this, that, or the other. And, 6 months ago, that company didn't exist.
Right. Yeah, I know. On my side, it's very, very scary. And I tell my listeners and clients too, it might seem like it's, easy to, it's a free trial. But
Right.
remember, your data you're responsible for your data. And if you hook in some service that you don't know anything about, and they have access to your CRM or your ERP and they have data, now you are liable for that data. And if there's and if there's a subject right request form, if you're, we're seeing a lot of scary things happening in California. I specialize in privacy protection and data mapping and things like that. And I got a request for a client of mine in New York the other day, and it was they hadn't filed the lawsuit yet, but it was a violation of a California Consumer Protection Act, because one of the pixels we had in our cookie preferences was misclassified. Right now, they're not even doing business in California, but we're seeing widespread that using AI, now lawyers are looking for loopholes and everyone's at risk, right? And so for private equity, my question is, when you take over a big company and there's a CEO or you think there's best practice, and now there's some, maybe they were doing some kind of violation of data or whatnot, who's responsible for that? I mean, it doesn't seem like in America there's really any rules for who's responsible at the moment.
Yeah, and it's unclear, and sometimes there are state laws and maybe even federal laws that you can lean on. But it's why due diligence is so important, particularly legal due diligence and also human resources diligence. It's critical. You often know what you're buying, but you sometimes don't know who you're buying, right? The people, right? The character of individuals. It's hard because when you're going through the deal, it's very what I'll call romantic, right? Everyone's saying the right things and, everyone's excited. The seller's probably going to get a nice check. The deal team has won a deal and there's euphoria, right? Everyone's super excited to partner. But the moment of truth is post-close, right? Hence, kind of why I wrote this book. And if you get things wrong in diligence, right, it could have a very significant impact on your investment from the time you bought it to the time you exit. And cybersecurity is one of those areas that we spend a lot of time on, because when private equity comes in and it's announced, bad actors will come in and say, well, oh, wow, they've got a pretty big investor behind them now. It might be time to agitate, right? So we look at that, but then you're also going through backgrounds of individuals, and you would be shocked, Anna, sometimes what you find in people's background checks. And in many cases, we've walked away from deals because we didn't think that based upon the background check, the person had the value system that we required, and maybe they're reformed and that sort of thing, and that's great. But we don't want to take that chance, right? We don't want to be the test case for someone that's reformed bad behavior, right? And in some cases, I'm talking felonies, and it can get pretty bad. So yes, your point is 100% right. You got to be careful with AI because there are bad actors. And people are using the tools for nefarious purposes. And it just makes it much more important to be thorough in your due diligence, particularly around IT, legal, and HR. And we spend a lot of time doing that, and we spend good money doing it. We'll hire people and maybe overpay, but we want to get that right.
Yeah, I can see that would be very, especially now with how quickly it's all happening. And
to answer your question, it becomes our problem, right? There are certain types of deals that you can do, and I won't get into it. There are stock type deals where you assume all the liability, and asset deals where you're only taking the assets. So if you're doing an asset deal, there's some protection there, but again, it doesn't protect you from people coming in or coming with the business and continuing to behave poorly. In fact, there's a chapter in the book where I talk about a team coming in and spending money wildly, lavish trips and dinners, and it's almost like it's funny money, and it's unbelievable that people will come in and, kind of treat their investors the way this particular management team did. What happened? But again, due diligence for this, everyone's shaking hands, everyone's happy. You think you've got the right partners, and 3 months in, you're looking at the P&L and you're like, what the hell's going on with SG&A? What's going on with, these operating expenses? And there's 5-star hotels, first-class flights everywhere.
Wow.
On the dime of the company, and the company's not doing well, by the way, right? So, look, I can go down, a rabbit hole here, but yes, what you're saying matters deeply.
Wow, that's that's shocking. I mean, living beyond your means, like on
with other people's money.
Right. Money. It makes me think about that. There was a book. It was 3 Cups of Tea, I think it was called. And did you ever hear about that? Where everyone was sending money. What's his name? But he was writing a book about how he was opening schools in Pakistan for women and children, and it was like a beautiful book. And I remember I was in boarding school at the time, and I sent him a check for $15 for his foundation to help educate these girls. And then it came out years later that they'd only made they had made a school, but they'd made 2 schools, and all the rest of the money they had taken and spent on these kinds of, big events in Puerto Rico for all the people who worked there. And so it happens.
It's unfortunate, right? Because it's using a good cause for, it's really unfortunate that people are like that.
So on that note, so how important are aligning on values between the private equity investor and the company? And what are you looking for about how do you incorporate values and make sure that your company values still are maintained, but also that you have consistency across those 2 metrics?
Yeah, look, that's huge. And for me personally, that's a really big deal. Because if you don't have a value system in a company, you actually don't have anything. You really don't. So for me, the value system has to align with the private equity firm that I'm working with. And having been with this particular firm for over 10 years, I can say, as a matter of fact, it's one of the best aspects of working with this team at Trive Capital, the value system, the character, the integrity, even in tough times, even when you disagree, you're not disagreeable. Everyone's respectful. You're challenged. Obviously, you've got to produce, you've got to perform. But, you can be tough and you can have high expectations without being a jerk, right? I don't think those things are mutually exclusive, right? So that's one thing that I look for with the private equity firm, but also with the people that I hire. Everybody that works with me has to demonstrate that they have the same value system that I have, because that's going to be the value system of the entire company. So that's something I solve for when I'm hiring people. And it's also something that we look for when we're out buying companies. Like, can we trust these folks? Is their character similar to ours? What happens when there's adversity? Are they going to be honest? And you just have those conversations. And what I do is sometimes just ask open-ended questions or give scenarios and ask people how they would deal with those scenarios, just to get a feel for it. But how do you make it something that is sustainable, right? I think you've got to demonstrate it, right? Every opportunity that you get to demonstrate your value system, you have to do it. Quick little story. We had a person in one of our divisions that we asked many times to make a change to something operational that would be consistent with all the other businesses. And this particular person didn't want to do it, didn't agree with the change, thought, frankly, that it would hurt the business he was running. And we laid out numbers and analysis and gave him examples where we didn't think that was going to be the case. And should it be the case, we could always walk it back and that sort of thing. But we did really want him to take this action. And, a member of my management team went in to talk to him about it. And in front of his entire team, this general manager was cursing and being defiant and unprofessional and all those things. And this kind of came back to me. And I said, well, guys, this is an example of a violation of our culture, of our value system, right? There's only one answer here, and that's a termination, right? Because we've got to demonstrate that we are who we say we are, right? And we've got to, make it. But and this person produced, Anna. This person was running a good business. They were doing well. But everyone was waiting to see, well, are these guys at Cascade who they say they are? right? Or are they going to pretend that didn't happen because the business was doing well, and you don't want to mess up a good thing. And this isn't the first time this has happened in my career, but you have to make an example, and you have to walk the walk if you talk the talk. So you have to demonstrate that your values are core, and not just use the words.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And it makes me think, I had another guest on, we were just talking about how the hiring cycle, especially in today's environment, has really extended. People are so afraid to make the wrong choice with any kind of executive hire or any hire at all. And now we're looking at what she told me. It shocked me that it was, sometimes up to a year, 9 months to a year that they're looking and interviewing, and multiple interviews and multiple different types of tests. And so I'm hearing the echo of how long does it usually take before when you start getting interested in a company for private equity acquisition, how long does that process usually take before you're signing papers?
Yeah, it depends. The rule of thumb is from the time you start evaluating the company until the time that you close is about 6 months, right? And there's a bunch of process steps in there. There's something that they give you initially that's a teaser. So a banker or a sell-side advisor will say, here's, 5 or 6 bullet points or a tear sheet on this company. Are you interested? And if you're interested, you'll say, yeah, it's interesting. I'd like to learn more. Then you sign an NDA, right? Non-disclosure agreement, where you're agreeing now that the information you're going to provide to me, I will keep confidential, right? You sign the NDA. That's when they give you this book I talked about earlier, which is called the SIM, right? The Confidential Information Memorandum. You go through it, you make a determination as to whether or not this is something you want to go for. If that is the case, you provide them with what's called an IOI, right? Indication of interest, right? Saying, hey, I am interested in meeting with management. This company seems to be something that makes sense for us. And here's some high level numbers associated with, kind of our potential bid for the company. So you may say, look, I'll give you a range of what we may pay for it. If there's any structure, and structure means, is there anything that I need to do to mitigate, kind of the deal? Do I want, rollover equity from the sellers? Do I want there to be an earnout, which means over a certain period of time, if you continue to perform, we'll give you more of the proceeds. So you kind of lay out your structure. And if the advisor and the management team are open to your offer, you will be invited to a management presentation where you sit down with management, usually in person, or it could be via Zoom. It's 2 to 3 hours, and you quiz them on the different aspects of the business. There's things that you saw in the SIM you may want more information on. Help me better understand this. Sometimes these meetings involve tours of facilities, right? So you might be walking around with this. They may be pointing out things. And after that meeting, you'll be given 3 weeks. A data room is created. That's just kind of this virtual file that has a bunch of information, like the employee census, all the locations, blah, 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 all the financial information you can think of. And after you kind of digest all of that, you determine if you want to put in an LOI, which is a letter of interest, right? Which is now binding, with very detailed specifics on what you're willing to pay for the company, and frankly, how fast you can get the deal done. And this goes back to your initial question. So that first part that I talked to you about is probably 4 months of meetings and interactions. And then once they get a signed LOI, you're racing to a close, right? And that's when you're turning on, as we speak, the way we speak, your QOE, quality of earnings, just trying to validate their numbers, get a third party to do that. We talked earlier about legal due diligence. You're hiring lawyers, and maybe you have internal people to do that, more business diligence. So all the other things you need to do to understand that company before you stroke a check, you've got a couple months to do that, and then you close. And that's usually the process. And I know there's a lot there, but it's usually 6 months, 3 or 4 months of real due diligence, and 2 months of really trying to do confirmatory diligence with lawyers and accounting people and business diligence people. And maybe that's a little bit too much, but
I love it. I think it's really good. And then the deal happens, and then after the deal, is there like a little bit of a resting period, or is it just like straight into it?
No, and so towards the end of the diligence period, there's a team working on integration, right? There's a team already working on what day one is going to look like, what day 30 is going to look like, what day 60, day 90 is going to look like. And on the other side of the close, you're in there and you're executing, you're changing bank statements, you're changing vendors, or, putting vendors in the new name of the new entity. If you're going to make some changes to the management team, you probably are starting that process. So you've got this playbook that you've developed in anticipation of closing. And once the deal is consummated, that integration team is in there typically doing their work. And it can be super disruptive to that management team because in many cases, they've never been through anything like that before, right?
Sure.
And oh, by the way, we want them to continue to stay focused on their business and keep doing a great job. So it's a tough first 3 or 4 months on the other side of a deal because there's a lot of legal and accounting things that have to get done. They just have to because it's legal and it's accounting, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, those are always fun things to go through.
That's right.
Changing of, even just setting up an LLC, all the different paperwork you have to do and all those kinds of things.
That's right.
Wow.
It's not insignificant. There's a lot of details.
Well, this has been really interesting. So what's next for you, Ty? Are you working on another book? Well, tell me about yourself. Are you doing public speaking? What's next for you?
No, I'm really focused on my job at Cascade, frankly. It's really trying to get the best outcome possible for all of our stakeholders with Cascade. But, during nights and weekends, I'm definitely talking to folks about the book and how I might be able to help them, do a few speaking engagements, a couple of podcasts like we're doing right now, just really trying to get the word out that, hey, if you're thinking about selling your company or you already did, and you're just trying to understand what life is really like on the other side of it, here's a resource for you. So the main thing is the main thing, but I do love to help people when and where I can. So when those opportunities present themselves, I take advantage of them. Hence our discussion now.
Great. Well, how can people get a hold of you and where can they find your book?
Yes, so the book is on at Amazon and Target and Barnes and Nobles and all the places you probably go and purchase your periodicals, assuming people still purchase, kind of books. So it's out there. I'm out on LinkedIn, Tyrone R. Johnson. So you can look me up on LinkedIn. And I also have a website, which is www.tyronerjohnson.com. So all the information's out there as well.
Great. And so all our listeners will be including that, of course, into the channel here right below this episode. And thank you so much for joining me, Tyrone. And for everyone who's listening, if you have not done so yet, please subscribe to this channel. We just hit over 200,000 subscribers, and I'm overwhelmed with gratitude. It's because of you and your aloha. So please continue to share this content with your friends and family and colleagues so I can get more great guests like Ty to come and share their wisdom with us. And I cannot wait to see you next week in the Pixels. Aloha.
All right, thanks, Adam. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Covert Code Podcast. If you're loving the insights we share here, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform and leave a review. Your support helps us reach more digital innovators like you. Share this episode with your friends and colleagues on social media and help spread the word. And if you're in the solar space or just curious about where clean energy is headed, I'm thrilled to announce my brand new podcast, The Solar Coaster. This show digs into the real stories, trends, and challenges of the solar industry, with bold conversations and powerful takeaways you won't hear anywhere else. Follow The Solar Coaster now so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks for tuning in. See you in the Pixels. Aloha.
Hi, my name is Robinson Aquino. I'm the author of The Small Business Money Game, the hidden strategies that turn survival into scale. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about why I wrote this book. Growing up, I was an avid fan of Monopoly. I like to think that I was the best player in our house, but my brother Alex dominated the board whenever he could. And it was one of my first early lessons in economics, what taught me that a game that should be fair, where we all start with the same assets, where we all earn the same income, quickly turns into a game that is quite unfair, a game where the minority owns all of the assets. And as I studied finance and economics, and as I spent the last 12 years working with entrepreneurs, I've learned this money game that we call business is very similar to that little game of Monopoly. In this book, I've written strategies on how to price, on how to manage costs, on how to scale businesses, and more importantly, where entrepreneurs consistently get stuck. I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Game on.